All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is our fourth episode of the Blowback Roundtable. Today, we don't have a guest. It's just myself, Carlo, and Ben, but there's more than enough to discuss. Um, Today, we wanted to talk about the grain deal, and we've actually been talking about the grain deal for a while, but then we realized that we weren't even live. So now that we're live, we're gonna we're gonna we're gonna dive in. Um, so in the West, we're being bombarded with this propaganda offensive that the grain deal is expiring or has expired, and Russia is just being their typical inhumane, selves and trying to starve the kids in Africa just because they're evil. So there's people going hungry, and it's Russia's fault. It's the fault of their brutal war, and now they're not even going to let the children eat. So anybody that really buys that, shame on them. They should know better by now not to listen to, Western narratives. But we're going to discuss exactly why those narratives aren't true. So, Ben, if you want to discuss, the main points of the grain deal that were never lived up to by the West.
I'll bring in Grain Deal 101, but let me just preface this that neither of us had a lot of time to prepare, and that's why we also don't have a guest. We had individually unfortunate days. I didn't have power for most of the day, but here we still are. And the grain deal officially expires today, but was actually terminated yesterday. Now, I read the official original documentation signed by the UN, Turkey, Ukraine, and Russia almost exactly a year ago. So July 22, 2022. It's been going on for a year. And the stipulations are as follows with regard to Russia. Ukraine can export its grain safely. It's guaranteed. The safety of the corridor is guaranteed by Turkey, Russia, and the UN. Okay. But Russia had stipulations. Number one was basically the Russian agricultural bank's access to SWIFT, so exemption from sanctions, so it can deal with the West and sell its own agricultural products, which is most of the grain, most of the fertilizer and ammonia in the world, and that hasn't been lived up to. Number two was, I really screwed that up. I did it better the first time. I'm sorry about this, but basically with the Kerch Bridge attack. It was used. This agricultural corridor has been used to attack Crimea twice in a row now. And basically, they just said enough. It was just without gray areas. They said, it's over. We are exiting. There's no further space for deals. There's not going to be any discussions on this. That's what came out. And as you said, the Western propaganda is Putin is evil. He woke up one morning and decided to invade Ukraine. He's probably going to take the west of Europe, or he's drunk and he's out of missiles, whatever you want, but he's evil. And now he's basically, making all the people in the world hungry, especially the poorest in Afghanistan and Africa and all that. That's the Western take on things. Whereas, just like the Minsk agreement, this was signed in good faith by Russia, and for over a year, it got zero benefits from it. It lost $1 billion, according to the head of the grain union. It was a very bad deal for Russia, and the West just said, yeah, here's the nice wording. You sign it, we sign it, and then we just don't have to live up to it. But you have to, and now you have to keep it open. Otherwise, look at the barbaric Ruskies wanting to starve people. That's the short story of the grain deal. But it did spike grain prices on the global exchange.
Since the termination of the deal, the prices have gone up, right?
Yeah, they have.
That was your last point. So there was the three things that the West never lived up to. Number one was it said the grain deal was going to help feed people in these poor developing countries.
Yes.
And the vast majority of the grain went to Europe, and it was used as livestock feed. Very, very, very small amount, a very, very small percentage of the grain that left Ukraine under the grain deal ultimately went to any poor countries developing, like in Africa. So that's number one. Number two was they promised to, not sanction the agricultural industries of Russia. So Russia would be allowed to utilize the SWIFT payment mechanism to freely export their grain and associated agricultural products.
Yes.
And that never happened. They were never able to utilize SWIFT throughout the entire year of the deal. And lastly, their Russia's agricultural products, were not only not able to utilize Swift, but they weren't able to.
Get to the people in need through this
Well,
corridor.
well, they were attacked, right? So like the ammonia pipeline, and the ammonia is part of the
Well, that was blown
fertilizer
up. Yes.
that Russia also exports, was attacked. So you know, in many ways, the West did not live up to their agreements, um, which nobody should be surprised by that, of course. But it makes total sense that Russia would say, "Okay, we're done with this agreement. It's not working for us. You're not upholding your end of the bargain." I want to hear from Ben just real quick how the Kerch Bridge, because that's a further aspect of it, how these attacks against Crimea were exploiting the existing freedom of navigation offered by the grain deal. So, do you want to speak to that last component of it?
Well, there have been two attacks, and the first one, they made a big postage stamp of on the second day without explicitly saying it was us. But come on, it was them. This time, it was a strike. What is it? Was it Sunday or Saturday night? It was the big Sunday, I think. So day before yesterday, the big terrorist attack, basically. Apparently, the news from the Ministry of Defense is it was using, I forgot and I didn't put into the cheat sheet the actual type, but a British underwater explosive drone. And what it did was just attack one lane of the auto lane, right? And unfortunately, there was a 16-year-old little girl who lost both her parents and was in critical condition, but has made it through. But basically, it cost two totally innocent lives without hindering Russia's military at all, because, there was the big railway track as well on that bridge. And by the way, traffic's been open. It's been repaired. It's done. It's nothing. It was a symbol for Ukraine. But they keep doing these terrorist attacks through the protected lane, the humanitarian grain corridor. Then Russia said that's just enough. I don't know if that was the reason for it, or it was just to gaze morale. And Carlo thinks I never get angry, but right next day I saw these NAFO people doing videos celebrating Kerch Bridge is on fire in the disco, celebrating that this girl was now orphaned. Just horrible stuff was in the internet. On the internet. So I think that was the last straw. And by the way, by today, this is the latest news. There's already been Kinjal strikes, like numerous Kinjal strikes on the manufacture of drones, fuel depots, and the staging areas for this attack in Odessa and Nikolaev. This is the Ukraine occupied areas in the southwest. But how it factors into the grain deal is, basically. I'd say enough is enough. Russia has said this many times. All the red lines have been crossed, and still terrorist attacks. We remember Darya Dugina. We remember the Kharkovka dam. Not to mention Nord Stream. It's just, when is it going to be enough for these people? They can't do anything on the front lines because this counteroffensive has basically today more territory has been won by Russia than by Ukraine. So they resort to this. What else do you call it other than a terrorist? So, Carlo.
No, look, it's like the West doesn't realize that you can't fight this war wearing virtual reality goggles. This propaganda sense that everything that they do is like a kind of petulant child trying to pinprick Russia into some vicious attack that really doesn't go in their favor. To kind of break them out of this mold that they have, this war of attrition, which has been very effective. And the propaganda in the West, I think it's upsetting to hear people spout such nonsense in the comment sections of all the Western forms of newspapers and online chat lists but the rest of the world is not fooled. Africa, for example, President Ruto, Ruto of Kenya and Ramaphosa of South Africa, these people are not. They're they're so more sophisticated than the people in the West. It's hard to imagine how the West was ever able to impel to bring pressure upon. I'm sorry, not being articulate today, but as usual, but to really to even have had this imperial past, it's it's amazing to me. It's somehow they've reverted back to this kind of neotenous situation that is the kind of permanent childhood that they think somehow is an effective way to address the situation, and I think they're going to lose very, very big.
I
I mean,
completely agree, but you're making a lot of sense. The people who have been through brutal colonialism, they've seen this a million times before. Their eyes are wide open. It's just the little bubbles in Western Europe and the US. That's who this propaganda about Russians starving children in Africa is meant for. And they're the only ones falling for it. Unfortunately, even in Hungary, I can say it's been quite effective. It's been quite effective, even to
it
normal,
also
well-read people.
it strikes me also that there was certain people or certain powers in the West that were not happy with the grain deal, because it seems like they repeatedly did everything they could to sabotage it in order to get Russia to drop out, right? Like, I mean, so it's like they weren't happy that Russia entered into it in the first place, and they kept on sabotaging it because it was either because it was bad PR because Russia was doing something good, or because they wanted to be able to do what they're doing now, which is this big PR offensive saying Russia's starving all the kids in Africa. But
Yeah, well,
it
the
definitely seems that
sanctions maniacs probably
the
hated
West
it.
didn't want the deal. They were to utilize the freedom of navigation to attack them, to blow up their ammonia pipelines, to not give them access to SWIFT, to sell their agricultural products.
Look, if you look at it from the
Yeah.
point of view that Carlo just introduced, where it's everything is PR, everything is on the TV screens, then starving Africa would be a good point for them, wouldn't they? They just gobble up everything here in Europe. It doesn't matter. Just burn the grain, like we did in Hungary when we got Ukrainian grain. As long as people are starving and we can blame Russia, that's still a PR win, given that there's enormous panic, just one after another. I think I had like 12 articles of panic on the situation in the actual war. Is going very, very badly. I'm guessing that could have been the cause. I mean, mostly, as you said, mostly it went to the West, but it was the EU and the UN both documented these trades. 92 and 98% went to Europe for cattle, basically for the animals to eat, for the agricultural industry. And some of it was resold by the EU and by Turkey to some global South countries. And I think the largest of them was like 6% to China. That's it. That was the largest developing country. I mean, that's debatable, but still, that was the largest developing country. All of it went to highly developed, rich country.
and that is absolutely synchronous with the general position that the West takes. They don't give a rat's rectum about Africans or South America
Or Ukrainians.
when the price of grain goes up, they profit. This is how much they don't care about Ukraine and Russia's position, because when the price of grain goes up, it goes up universally, worldwide. So the price that Russia is going to get for its grain is higher now. Is going to be higher, just like oil is on the rise. It's the same sort of thing. So it doesn't. They don't even seem to care about. Well, they know that Ukraine has lost this war. So they're just like profit grabbing here. It seems to me it's just we can do this grain bullshit, and our price will go up. We're going to get more money for the grain we have in our hands.
Yeah. There's one rule that every capitalist knows: it's every crisis is an opportunity, isn't it? In disguise or just overtly. Yeah, very true.
Moon of Alabama, great resource to read. He takes Western journalism or Western propaganda and deconstructs them. So there was a claim made that over 50%. That was the verbatim claim from like a WAPO article or New York Times or something. Over 50% of the grain went to developing countries. So that paints a picture in people's minds like,
WAPO, yeah.
Oh my God! But
how did he pick it apart?
And he discovers that, well, by developing countries, a lot of those countries are actually high-income countries. China was the main developing country that got most of the grain, like you said. But, I mean, they're hardly food insecure, and they're hardly reliant on, grain imports. and they're not.
I think there's
They're
one
not
in there you can call
good
global
in
south,
Europe.
either Egypt or Bangladesh or something like that. It was one country I found on that list that you mentioned.
Yeah, it was below 5%. Like actually poor countries that are really struggling like was received less than 5% of the grain. But yeah. So that's definitely a topic which I think we handled pretty good. Is there's all kinds of other
Oh, sure. We
goings
can
on.
navigate away just on that point that the price
Yeah.
of wheat is universal. The price of bread ain't. You guys have about half the inflation that Europe has when it comes to food inflation, real inflation. I mean, the US. China has basically close to zero, and so does Russia. Their bread prices are the same as 2 or 3 years ago. So people who think, oh, everybody's paying this real extra for stuff, that's just not true. I want to say there's heaps of these videos you can find on Telegram, going through the supermarkets, checking the actual ruble prices of things. Just don't think that somehow this is a universal thing, this inflation and cost of living crisis brought on in the West.
Yeah, it's hitting
I wanted
Europe
to
worse. Yeah.
I wanted to add one more point because all of this, let's list the guys. I think it was Ursula, Baerbock, Blinken, Guterres, everybody blamed Putin for this. That look, they're starving the worst people, the poorest people, the most in need. And just the next day, today, Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for the president, for Vladimir Putin, came out that we will deliver to the countries in need the lost Ukrainian grain for free. And to me, that looks like that's just disarmed all of these claims, like immediately, because they will do it. I mean, the question will be insurance of these ships, but I don't think Russia can. I think Russia can just whip up something like insurance.
I didn't catch that, but for sure,
that's fresh.
If Russia says they're gonna, at least continue on the same level that it's been for the past year, delivering grain to actually poor countries, that should be easy to do because hardly any poor country's got any grain anyway. But yeah, I expect that if there's, all this grain got freed up, that they're no longer that they're sanctioning. The West is going to sanction it. I mean, to get it to actual poor countries, I expect you're going to increase the percentage of poor countries that get the grain. So I totally expect to see that happening.
True, but there's a couple of new developments. I don't know if you know, there was this joint coordination center. It was part of the deal in Istanbul, Turkey, where the Russians, the Turkish, and the UN people, they had to inspect every ship, where it's going and all that, and they all had to agree. And now Zelensky apparently is waiting for the Turkish president's answer at the UN, saying we can continue the deal, just the two of us, without Russia, who pretty much owns the Black Sea at this moment, like 90% of it. I wonder how he thinks, like logistically, that could actually happen now that we knew that the port of Odessa, which was the main exit ramp,
Right.
has been bombed to smithereens. I just don't know how these people think, but that's his world.
Somebody said, Russia would have to destroy the port of Odessa because it wouldn't be good PR for them to
I remember this.
To shoot or destroy the individual ships that together Ukraine and Turkey say should be able to go and land and get grain and leave without Russia's approval. So, that puts Russia in a spot where they're going to have to make a decision. Do they interdict these, ostensible civilian vessels? Is Turkey and Ukraine going to put together some kind of a system that they're going to protect these ships with their own navies? I mean, again, like you said, the Black Sea is, owned by Russia. Like they have, naval superiority.
It's called the Black Sea Fleet, guys. It guaranteed the safety of these vessels.
So it'll be interesting if, Turkey and Ukraine think they can, negotiate something without Russia. And if Russia's just they're going to sit by and let that happen. And as if it wouldn't be exploited for military purposes in any event. So
I've given up on Erdogan, but Carlo, you had a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that with this the grain deal being abrogated, Ukraine pretty much sealed its fate as being a landlocked country.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a fait accompli now. And also, I just wanted to mention that I think of no really logistical significance, but Russia did bomb Snake Island last week. They They
Oh yeah,
that,
right
that
after the
postage
PR
stamp.
stunt. Yes.
Yeah. So and they could, if they wanted, and I don't know why anybody would want Snake Island. It's insignificant, really.
You could put
But
five
if
houses
they
on there.
wanted, they could take it in a heartbeat. But I think now Russia will definitely move into Odessa, and then move further west and link up with Transnistria.
Look,
I think
as
that's pretty
usual,
much a lock.
the Russian Pulse, the Russian Telegram channels were furious, and they are obviously for gloves off. We've just had enough of this. There are no more people. A lot of the mortar shells have been. I think her name was Angelina. This little girl who lost her parents in the Kerch Bridge attack. It was for Angelina, and they are pissed, and rightly so. And they want an end to this terrorism. So,
Brian
yeah,
Berletic always has good analysis, good opinions, and he kind of presents it as if it's another provocation by the West, hoping to get Russia to do something that can be used against them. So he talks about the hotheads that you just described,
yeah.
that are demanding vengeance, retribution. Russia, you got to do something. And he's Brian Berletic's perspective is that hey, we're gonna suffer these things because they're literally meaningless. It's not gonna change the overall end result.
It
And
didn't change anything, but yeah, you could get emotion about these things, and
no,
they
that's
did.
true. That's true. But on the other hand, I mean, if you do something, wild, right? Like in response, you could jeopardize what right now is an inevitable end. And so you don't want to jeopardize an inevitable end by doing something that the West can use to as a provocation or an escalation themselves. So, but it's tough, and it is emotional for those of us, watching how evil and without any kind of moral restraint the West is behaving. So
Good point. They also don't want to jeopardize all the goodwill they've earned around the world, not in the collective West, but in what is called the global South, but all the third world countries. I mean, if you look at it from a point of view of Russian restraint, and it looked like a bad idea at first, and it looks like a bad idea at points of time. I think Vladimir Putin, whether knowingly or not, he exposed this as a proxy war. He exposed Zelensky as the little fraud he is. Pretty much everybody who meets him or sees him on TV can't stand him anymore. By the way, he's back in the bunker, in front of the pure white wall, and he looks horrible. He actually looks fearful. But he's exposed these things for most normal people to see. I mean, most people, some Ukraine flag accounts, still exists. There's no Ukraine flags in my country left anymore. There was a few at the beginning, but just none. I think that patience in the long run has gone very well. Whether the economic storm, whether the huge PR campaign still ongoing, I think weathered it very well. And obviously the military side of things. I mean, the Lancer drones. I watched on the same day. Sorry, this is not in the cheat sheet. This guy who invented these things, he took a little segue in the factory floor between the little workshops, because there's so many of these things, the Lancer drones, the four wings, the kind of X-wing type rocket that is hunting Western weapons. And at the same time, I think Bloomberg ran a headline, don't worry. I mean, Ukraine can't relax yet, but there's only 50 of them left. There's only 50 Lancers left. In that video, there's more than about 500 of them, but okay. So they have their copium.
But I mean, so Carlo, did you want to say something before I give my 2 cents?
No, but I have something. I want to change the subject in a couple of directions.
Okay.
But not right now. Go ahead, Phil.
Well, Ben just brought up the big picture, and if we look at the big picture, the inevitability of Russian success, the inevitability that Ukraine is gonna not win militarily, and then we look at exactly what the whole Ukraine situation is about, right? It's about weakening and destabilizing Russia. It's about regime change in Russia. It's about balkanizing Russia. It's about stealing Russian resources, and it's about creating in Russia a power that is going to do what the West wants vis-a-vis China, right? So it's
not one. So, a million little Czechoslovakias, a little Poland's, little Estonias. Yeah.
Yes. So that's the idea. That's the hope. But we see that these grand strategies, these grand ambitions implemented by the West keep losing. Like they couldn't even overthrow Assad. They couldn't even do anything in Afghanistan. Sure, they killed Gaddafi and they turned Libya into a shithole terrorist state, a failed state with open air slave markets. They can destroy, but they can't accomplish any of their goals. So the decline of Western imperialism is inevitable, and we get bogged down in this minutia, this very little things, Well, we see that Ukraine just killed some Russian tanks. We've seen the videos. They had some success. Okay, that doesn't really mean anything in the grand picture. And the grand picture is the U.S., the West is not doing well at all, and they're in terminal decline, and they know it, and they really can do very little about it except lie to everybody. But go ahead, Carlo. Let's change the subject.
Before we change it, Carlo, put a pin in it because I want to hear it. There was a lot of panicked headlines about the front lines, about Europe is selling weapons it cannot make. A lot of the production forces are down. We're going to be depleted for 18 years. A lot of that shit is in there. And in the meantime, as these regime change and war events go, I mean, Afghanistan you mentioned, but the DPRK is still standing and they can't bloody well take it. There's a lot of things that didn't work out. Belarus is the next on the chopping block. The European Parliament wants Lukashenko the ECC, the European Criminal Court or something, International Criminal Court, to hand a little thing to Belarus, and they're going to sanction him next. They don't know what else to do. The sanctions hadn't worked, so more sanctions and more ICC. Carlo, off to you.
Yeah, take it to pick it up in Africa again. If you look at a map of Africa, and you with the intention of finding out where the Wagner Group is, you'll find that there's 12 countries now that have a concentration of Wagner in them, and most of them, 8 of the 12. Let's see, with the exception of Libya, Madagascar, Mozambique, and the Central African Republic. All the others are in the Sahel region.
The strip in the middle, yes.
Strip across. Now, I point out in the Central African Republic, I think it's been 2 weeks now, a group of Wagner mercenaries rescued a group of Chinese engineers who were being held hostage by one of the breakaway groups. There's hundreds of them. It seemed dozens of these
armed, funded, and trained by the West.
Yeah, the CIA, a lot of them, yeah, and crazy. And so, if you can see where there's a kind of symbiosis between Wagner and the Chinese development, the Belt and Road Initiative, because I think Wagner is being kept in Africa as a kind of security force for the Chinese to go forward with the Belt and Road Initiative, which one of the most important things is to run from, I think it originates in Ethiopia or possibly southern Sudan, a highway and a high rail and a fast rail system across Africa in the southern Sahel, all the way to it goes from the Horn of Africa all the way to Western Africa. I think Guinea-Bissau is the country where it'll terminate, and Guinea-Bissau has Wagner. They're helping out, and we already know of the tremendous success that the Wagner has experienced in Mali, for example. They're doing things that obviously the French couldn't possibly do because they were just interested in stealing.
I was going to say Macron must
Mali,
be pissed.
Yeah.
Most of the area you described was probably ex-French colonies with a lot of foreign Legion d'étrangers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So bye, French. We've had enough of you. The Africans are really savvy now, and they're getting an opportunity to present their case. So I'm feeling real bullish on Africa. So.
Well, the Belt and Road Initiative is a threat to the West, and the West can't even compete with it, right? The West doesn't even try and compete with it. There was some PR offensive a couple of years ago about how the West was gonna, introduce their own version, but it was.
I remember
even
the EU did one and the US did one, so there were 2 of these. Yeah,
and I mean, if you looked at the numbers, like it was like less than 10% of what China is. It wasn't serious.
Less than 10% than China does in a year or something. Not that what it's already put into that over like 15 years.
And even that minuscule amount was never actually put forward. Like, so nothing ever came of it. It was a big nothing burger. But what the West can do is destroy. So they can train and arm and fund terrorist groups. They can direct these terrorist groups to destroy, to intimidate the Chinese engineers, the people, the governments that work with China that get, contracts to develop and improve their country. We can overthrow those governments. So that's what the West is engaged in. It's intimidation, it's violence, it's regime change, it's anti-democratic. And ultimately it's going to fail. And I really hope, Carlo, that Wagner, you are actually absolutely right. I hope Wagner is in there, protecting and facilitating the development of the Belt and Road. I hope that's true. And to whatever extent it is true, like, thank God for Wagner and for Russia. Yep. I mean, I am a little apprehensive about Wagner just because of Prigozhin, but I'm sure Russia is dealing with those issues.
It was just, I'm sorry. It's just that it was necessary to have some security there. I mean,
for sure.
28 African countries now have AFRICOM in there, and that's a U.S. destabilizing force in all of Africa. So they have this tremendous ability to go and screw things up, and and the big difference I'm always pointing out to people is AFRICOM is a security operation, whereas the Belt and Road Initiative is a developmental operation.
Yeah.
But as a purely developmental operation, it needs protection, and I think that Putin has understood that, and that's why he's dead set on retaining the Wagner Group in Africa, and if possible, increasing.
I think you're spot on there. I think you're spot on, because the Belt and Road is peaceful. Let's pour the US debt, the money that China makes, into real infrastructure. Everybody knows where infrastructure comes, prosperity goes up. I wanted to show you the shape of the future, something that actually gave me, this is exactly what I said about it. This is the shape of the future. You can see the light beyond the deep shadow of the Western hegemony and global imperialism. The future is harmony and development. I can't help it. It reminds me of the Soviet Union. We had lots of Turkish, black, Chinese, Vietnamese people right here in my city, in my childhood. And this city is called Manjuli. It's China's largest land port. It's like a one little ring in the chain that is the Belt and Road Initiative. And as you can read, there is like 28 ethnic groups living in Han, Mongolian, Russian, Uyghur, Tibetans live here. What you can see down here is the most famous Russian restaurant. You have to register to get in there. Like, there's 2 weeks to get a table. It's beautiful. It's prosperous. It's these people, different cultures living together in harmony. I really hope, I really wish this is the shape of the future. It's trying to be sabotaged and stopped as much as the West can muster. But this looks to me the trend that we're going in, initiated by China, safeguarded by Russian military power, as Carlo pointed out. And I just want to say that there were 2 very interesting, anniversaries, just these recent days, that it's the first part of the cheat sheet. July 16th, so that's 2 days ago, and more than 20 years ago, 2001, Vladimir Putin, this is his second year in his first term as president. He signed a comprehensive friendship and good neighborliness treaty with Jiang Zemin, then Premier of China. I don't know why Facebook is giving me all this crap, the notification sound. I wonder how much of this he foresaw and China foresaw, that we are the quagmire that we are in today, the declining West, the Belt and Road, which began in 2008. It's just staggers me. The second was back in 2016, MH17, the Malaysian flight that was down somewhere over Donbass, and basically no one knows who shot it down because the West did its own investigation, just blocked out Russia. And to this day, a lot of politicians have done this whole sorrow.
Who engages in provocations and false flags and lies and tries to blame somebody else? Like, who does that over and over and over and over and
but
over?
They bring it up. Ursula and everybody bring up how they light a candle and sorrow for the victims. Look at all these cars going back to Belgium, and they do this.
Disgusting.
It's just so polar opposite. I wanted to bring these two things into the discussion.
And Ben, the thing you said along about the 16-year-old Ukrainian kid, that was heartbreaking.
It was. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, you mean the soldier?
The soldier who was killed in,
Jesus Christ!
16 years old.
Yeah, we saw the grave of him today, and that's what it pissed me off. I had to go for a little walk around the flats. It's like the 1945, when the last of the Hitlerjugend was in the Sturmforces sent into the West. It's horrific. These are horrific crimes, and I really hope that someone will pay for them sooner or later. I mean, Lindsey Graham, come on, South Carolina, you can do better than this guy. I'm not saying Kinjal, South Carolina, but this guy, vote him out. This guy is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, as my wife had pointed out to me, the military-industrial complex is spread out all over all 50 states. So to get elected, you have to go along with the military budget. Otherwise, you won't get reelected because
Bernie
they
Sanders
have so much money. They'll trash you. They'll trash your election. So
the big leftist hope, Bernie Sanders, his state, was it Vermont?
Yeah,
lots of big military-industrial complexes there.
Yeah,
and that's how he switched around
That's how they make sure none of their weapons programs, get axed because they're made in all 50 states, and so you just have to have a couple states that refuse to cut jobs, and that's why those things go on in perpetuity, and that's why they're so expensive, and that's why they don't work too. But it's a Ponzi scheme, and it's utilizing military and violent imperialism to keep your economy afloat.
I
when
wonder
there's so many better ways to do it. China does their economy through development and building schools and hospitals and roads and bridges and ports.
Yeah, at unbelievable scales. Yes.
At unbelievable scale. How much better is that than investing in weapons programs and 800 military bases around the world and regime change and just exploitation of labor markets, resources? That's what the West has to offer, and that's why everybody's done with them. That's why we're moving on to bigger and better things.
Do you know what I like about that? That it's explicitly said by the money people. This is the last 2 days when I still had power. Janet Yellen said, the best you can do for the global economy is to support Ukraine. That was, I think, a fantastic, maybe Freudian slip. But the other one, Forbes, big money magazine, came out with the headline, these are the 5 reasons that the revitalization of U.S. industry goes through the Pentagon. It's like admitting that's our industry, guys. I mean, forget, what is it, Motown? What was it, where the big U.S. car manufacturer once was?
Detroit.
Yeah. No. This is the new Detroit.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish it.
I was going to say the population of Detroit was like 2 million back in the 50s. It peaked at 2 million. Now it's like less than 500,000. Mm-hmm. So, the outsourcing, I mean, it's one of the, what does that guy call it? A capitalist sacrifice zone. That's what Detroit was.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a Naomi Klein term, the sacrifice.
It could be.
Yeah.
Chris Hedges is the other.
Oh, Chris Hedges, maybe. Yeah. Naomi Klein's the shock doctrine girl. Yep. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead. And a subject I don't want to get too far off here, but one of the things I was engaging with last week was this notion of how popular culture is influencing people's perceptions, as it always has done.
Yeah, it's Top Gun, but go.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of, because I was reading articles and movies like Top Gun spur people on to enlist, but the United States Army has a real problem with enlistments. The other branches not so much, but they're still way down, or they're flat, and they're having trouble in enlisting people for whatever reason. I don't think I could really speak to that directly, but the article pointed out that no matter what the movie about war is, whether it's pro-war like Top Gun or Top Gun 2, or anti-war like Full Metal Jacket, people, young men primarily, are spurred on to join the military by any war movie. It's like Francois Truffaut, the French director, once said, "There is no such thing as an anti-war movie," and it was I found it really
Cool.
intriguing that that there's, and you can know what he means, but you can grasp what he means by that by looking at the fact that but that any war movie like Full Metal Jacket is certainly an anti-war movie. Uh,
You could say Saving Private Ryan, maybe.
yes, that was in the article too. Yeah, that was another one that spurred people on. And so last night I couldn't sleep, and about 1 o'clock in the morning, a movie came on about Ukraine, and it was about a Ukrainian hippie and his girlfriend and two, this cliches, two brutal Russians come up in a Jeep, and they find their little hovel that they live in, and of course they burn it to the ground. And then the young woman, the wife, when they're leaving, she had made a peace symbol out of white rocks in the front yard. She picks up one of the white rocks, which is like very symbolic. She's breaking the chain of peace, and threatens the Russian soldiers with it, and they shoot her and kill her. So this outrages her husband, and he becomes a sniper, and he just becomes another Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, that's Nazi level. That is
rock,
Nazi level propaganda. Birth of a nation
that
level
is.
propaganda.
sort of thing. And he kills them all. He's just this amazing sniper, and he gives up all of his peace, his notions of peace.
Was the movie about the modern conflict, or
yes,
about World War
it was
II?
about the contemporary conflict in Ukraine.
Okay.
Oh,
And
I
it was
didn't know they still
a Ukrainian
made
film.
a Ukrainian-made movie.
Yeah.
Yes, a
Interesting.
Ukrainian-made movie. I was taken by that. And also last week when I was reading those things, it reminded me of what I did once. I came across a stack of Johnny Got His Gun, and by Dalton Trumbo, where and this movie had a powerful impact on. Excuse me, the movie too, but this book had a powerful impact on me. So I bought a stack, and over the years I gave them to young people, young men, exclusively, that were talking about going into the military. I said, before you go into the military, read this book. Just read this book, and believe me, this doesn't have that Top Gun or Full Metal Jacket response to it. There's something about the way it's written and the way it's presented.
So your first point that you made, Carlo, was it's kind of along the lines of there's no such thing as bad publicity. So even the ostensible anti-war movies are promoting war, romanticizing it, and encouraging young people, to join the military. And then, but you're saying in literature that's a little bit different. So what is and I'm going to be honest with you. My whole engagement with that book is from the Metallica video. I never saw the movie and I never read the book, but I saw the Metallica video and I did think it was pretty powerful. So what I know is that it was somebody who suffered in one of the wars, and
World
he came
War
home.
One.
He couldn't see, he couldn't hear. Right,
he had all of his limbs blown away.
All of it, man,
and his face was blown off. And they had to put a moist rag over the skeletal remains of his face to keep him and breathing. And one of the most touching scenes in the book, not so much in the movie, I can't remember if they even, I don't know how they mask it, is a nurse who empathizes with his physician, comes in and realizes that he's what he needs, what his needs are, and she gives him a hand job. It's powerful. And of course Trumbo was brought before this Joe McCarthy Senate committee as because he was a communist and could not earn a living for the rest of his life when he was brought before the committee on I can't remember what it's called offhand now, but
And anti something.
something
Yeah.
committee, yeah. And so I recommend, if there's any viewers out there, I highly recommend this book, and I really highly recommend getting a copy for anyone in your family that's thinking of joining the military, and and it's, and you don't want them to make that. I mean, it's the likelihood of right now. It seems the U.S. taking an active role anywhere in the world, combat wise, seems far fetched. I mean, it's happening, but it's not much. There's not much publicity about it. But I rank that book up with Smedley Butler's War as a Racket, that comes at it from a completely different point of view.
That I've read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put it on my list to read because I don't know about this book. I was so uncultured, I'd say, that I thought the Aerosmith song "Janie's Got a Gun" had anything to do with it, but probably that's
No.
something very, very different.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we should mention to people out there that War is a Racket. You don't have to buy a copy of the book. The entire text, which is not very long, is
It's up.
available online. You can read it in 35 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I'm sorry, I got off topic.
No,
And that's
I mean-
Smedley Butler, who they wanted to install as a fascist puppet, the
Yes, they
big
did.
Wall Street interest in the United States, and he
The banker's
refused.
plot. Banker's plot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he
Yeah,
refused. And he described everywhere he went, he basically served corporate interest as a leader.
Yeah.
Of war.
Yeah, there's that brilliant paragraph in an article for Common Sense, I think. It's a socialist magazine, where he said I was a racketeer for capitalism, and so, and he lays it all out.
We started on this topic, talking about how the propaganda apparatus and the cultural war issues are utilized by the wealthy capitalists to maintain their obscenely disproportionate share of wealth, power, and privilege, and to keep democracy at bay, to keep the vast majority disenfranchised politically, disenfranchised economically, and so they can maintain this great system, because ultimately the Western capitalist system is great. It is the best system ever if you're a wealthy capitalist. Like, you couldn't be better, because the only other options for you as a wealthy capitalist is to give power away to a government that is of, by, and for the people. So that's not in your interest. So you want the status quo. You're going to fight tooth and nail to keep necessary, progressive, democratic change where the system works for the benefit of everyone to keep from happening. So they utilize their monopoly over the platforms of mass communication, the media, and this culture war, pumping out the music, the Hollywood movies that everybody watches, everybody enjoys, and it has an effect on their mind. It keeps them thinking in terms that are completely unthreatening to the status quo. And Hollywood, it's just so ridiculous. I mean, I really am noticing it now. Like, I'll turn on Netflix, I'll watch Prime. I need to escape. Like, we all need escapism, and the escapism they offer us is shit. Like, it's the same superhero bullshit. Like, we need a good socialist society to start coming out with some good art. I really do think that there's some good art from China. I've seen a lot of, Luciana Bone had, suggested many different movies. And you have too, Carlo, and I'm sure there's some good ones, but what Hollywood pumps out is literal shit. And it's really designed to rot people's brain and to keep them pacified, ignorant, disenfranchised. That's the whole point of it.
One of you brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and ever since then, it's so explicit in every little series, every movie I watch. I haven't noticed it. It's supposed to be innocent, and it really is very, very explicit. Brian Boletic pointed out, and I think he's right, that the information warfare aspect, that's a new front that most countries have to prepare for now. It can't just be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram everywhere. They have to have their own, like China has behind what they call a firewall. Now Russia is developing these alternatives. And most countries, if you want to be secure and sovereign, you have to have the information space, your own sovereign space.
Right. And people, Western leftists, the fake Western left, will accuse and attack China for not having, for having censorship, for not allowing they call it free speech, but it's really the ability for billionaires to proliferate their subversive propaganda designed to, overthrow the government of China, to wreck the living standards of the people. And so China is absolutely right and responsible to regulate that and to monitor it very closely. I mean, it's imperialism. They're targeted, so they would be derelict in their duties if they weren't doing exactly what they're doing. And it just makes the empire all the more angry that they can't get in there with their subversive messaging and rot everybody's brain. But it is effective, and they did get into Eastern Europe, and a lot of societies they have infiltrated, and they have turned people into supporting them against their own best interest. They've gotten people to, Western Ukrainians, for instance, is a case in point. You had a lot of Western Ukrainians thinking that they could be just like Western Europe. They could be just like the US, and they're enthralled with Hollywood and all the, the music industry, and they just love Western culture and they want it. And they see Russia as keeping them from it, and Russia's backwards, authoritarian. We don't want that. And these are the minds that the thoughts that fill these people's minds, and it's self-destructive.
Learn from Hungary, Romania, our neighbors.
Yeah.
We thought
they're
the
learning,
same.
They're learning now, right? Like,
we thought, we're not dying like Ukraine, but we thought the very same thing 30 years ago, and literally nothing has gotten better. We didn't get our dreams fulfilled. Most people are gastarbeiters in the West, sort of washing the plates of fucking English people. That's what we get from the EU. Yeah. We are the subspecies.
You can be their prostitutes. You can go and prostitute yourself.
And that's what awaits whoever survives Lvov or Ukraine. But I wanted to make another point, which I think you did it very fairly, about these Gusano peoples. I think the phrase these Western leftists use, saying, I love the Chinese people, but I hate the CPC. 97 million people, I think, over 90% approval. That's 4 Australias. Basically, what they mean is, I want the Chinese people back lying in their own piss in opium dens in absolute poverty, and we want to have all those resources. That's what these fuckers mean. They don't know it, but the ones who taught them this phrase, that's what they want.
Yeah. It's how civilizations can float on a sea of delusion has been one of the questions I've asked myself for many decades now. And I can't come up with a satisfactory answer. It's like going down a rabbit hole, and it's marvelous. I mean, this movie that was made in Ukraine was just as farcical as watching one of these super protagonists wipe out the Vietnamese, or the Viet Cong back in the 70s.
Oh, Watchmen. I think that's what you mean, right?
Could be.
Watchmen, there was a big blue guy called Dr. Manhattan, hello, nuclear program, and he just wiped them out with a thought with his hands. The Vietnamese sort of kneeled down and gave up, and that's the alternate history in this movie.
Yeah, there's lots of movies like that. And it's just, so if you have a population that can't think critically and can't see through the barrage of bullshit. I enjoy being able to see through the barrage of bullshit. I find that a valuable mental exercise. Most people don't, and they don't want to hear about the fact that that's bullshit and this bullshit. I mean, the Ukrainian movie, ultimately it was ludicrous. It bore no relationship to reality. And I'm not even a military man, and I could see the farcical dimensions to it. All the Russians just stood around in the open, just waiting for the sniper to shoot them. It's just absurd.
And just waited to attack these poor Ukrainians. Like, I think the Germans did this with the Hitlerjugend, the little guys. They went into the forest and said, grab that rabbit, and now you have to kill it because it's just like a Slav. It's not like you. It's a sub creature, and you have to get rid of this emotion, your I was going to say, compassion. You just have to get rid of it. That's the lesson of the movie. Russians are not people. They're here to kill you. Fuck peace. That's what it comes across to me. Since you introduced an anecdote, I know you want to say something, Billy Bob, but since we have a little bit more time, we can end a bit later. I want to bring in one because not the copium. What these people do when I met a person, very well read. I think he's going to be a lawyer / economist, very, very intelligent young person. Spoke with him over the weekend. And he kept telling me, come on, okay, let's go along with the Russian blah, 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 unprovoked invasion narrative. But look at all of the weapons that are out. And they admit it. The West admits it. It's 15 years to replenish this, 8 years to replenish that. We are all out. And he said, Ben, you don't think they sent the best stuff. If they sent the best stuff, Russia would be over in a week. They sent the word shit. And I just said, okay, I'm literally speechless. Like, you can always get to a B point and a C point and just revert to another point where it still looks wonderful. And I brought this up. There's these beautiful expos, like not beautiful, military expos, both in China and Russia. Here's our Miltech. Here's our latest one, the Checkmate, the Su-35. I don't think that the latest one beyond the 35 is called Checkmate. That's the code name for it. Here's the specs. Here's what it can do. Here's how fast it can go. Here's the range of stuff. That's what they do. And I think I watched the new B2 whatever, the updated B2 bomber. And it was like a Tesla reveal, a big stage, fog, and then a curtain goes up, little teaser, and sort of like a hashtag coming soon. There's absolutely nothing about it, but it looked like, some shiny polymer materials. It looks sci-fi. And that was it. We haven't heard the specs for it ever since. It's just like, it's something coming. And people are like at an Elon Musk thing, like, yes, this is it. This is the ultimate power. And they fall for this like idiots, like a TED talk. And basically...
Elon's big reveal when he tried to shatter the shatterproof windshield on his, and then he shattered it.
Yep.
But I think we're all talking about so Carlo mentioned how a society can survive and exist when everybody's floating in a delusional, sea.
A sea of delusion. Very good phrase.
What I would say is that the people who make the decisions aren't delusional. They're class conscious and they have interests and they know their interests and they pursue their interests. But their interests that are actually pursued by the people in power are the interests of a tiny, tiny, tiny minority of obscenely wealthy, elite, and powerful people that don't want to see their power and wealth threatened by the collective will of the rest of us, by democracy. And yet, they have the audacity to put into everybody's minds that we're democratic and these other places are authoritarian and we have to resist them because we have to fight for democracy. It's such a hoax. I mean, it's
like the democracy in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Right. Where you imprison all of your political opponents, you outlaw them, you don't have elections, you kill or close down all of the journalists that, say, hey, maybe we should get along with Russia. And
then you seize the church and you take people to the lamppost if they are accused even of being vatniks, a terrible word for Russian.
Well, from my point of view, the most effective argument against that is, okay, let's take a look at democracy. Let's take a look at Mossadegh in Iran in 1953. Let's take a look at Arbenz in Guatemala in 1954. Let's take a look at Father Aristide in Haiti twice. Let's take a look at the Ortegas in Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua when suddenly the Chamorros took power and set the country back 25 years right after the Sandinistas had, and the list goes on. If you're going to overthrow democracies, you have to and it's all the U.S. overthrowing them. If you're going to overthrow democracies, you have to shut the fuck up about backing them. You can't. It's as simple as that. And I think for me, at least in my experience, that's the most effective argument I can bring, because Americans are so stupid. They cannot make that connection. I mean, look at Ho Chi Minh. In 1968, they were going to have free and fair elections in Vietnam. Well, all the polls said, he's going to win 92% of the vote. No elections took place. The United States went in there and scotched the elections there.
More people know that than they know about the same thing happened on the Korean Peninsula after World War II.
Right.
Because Kim Il-sung would have won hands down any election, and that's why the U.S. said no elections. We're going to install our military dictatorship in the South, and you guys aren't going to have any elections. And he was one of those guys that was he was a comprador, or he was a what is the word? He collaborated. He was a collaborator with the Japanese imperial occupation of the South. He was nobody liked him. He wouldn't have won an election. So anyway, they hate democracy. They always have. And ultimately, I mean, it's because they fear it, because democracy threatens their interests of maintaining wealth, power, and control. So it's no different than it was in Marx's time. And we can learn a lot from history, from Marxism, from the successful revolution in Russia. But the material conditions we face are different today. But all those are valuable lessons that we need to learn from and understand. And we need to wake people up to the reality. But anyway, Ben, I probably talked all the ideas out of your head.
I think that was perfect. I wanted to add, even if you get into power, take Salvador Allende, the original 9/11,
yes,
you just get bombed to smithereens and they put in a Pinochet,
yeah.
Who was the guy who the British recently gave his tooth back to his family. Jesus, the African legendary leader.
Lumumba.
Patrice Lumumba. Yeah, you win. Even if you win, they're gonna fuck you up. Or as you already mentioned, Libya and Gaddafi.
But this is it's so frustrating. In 1965-66, the U.S. overthrew Goulart in Brazil, and then more recently, you had this absolutely bogus. What was that called, Rosalie? The operation against Lula. Car wash. I mean,
and Lula's back in. They did the same with Bolivia's Evo Morales. Evo Morales is back in. They tried to do it with Maduro. He's back in.
But he had to go through prison, and
yes.
And even HBO had a documentary that implicated. I mean, they just basically convicted Lula of car wash, and then it turns out that the Moro guy, the head of the Justice Department, working with the CIA, and the U.S. Justice Department. Yeah, it's just that's what's so frustrating about it. Is it?
Well, I personally love that Bolsonaro is in Florida somewhere, whereas Lula is back in power.
Bolsonaro. Yeah. Too bad he can't play dominoes with some of those ex-Cuban people. Maybe he does in Miami.
Maybe he can find Guaido as good company. Maybe Zelensky will join them one day.
Yes, maybe he visits Trump and looks at some of the classified information.
So we're describing, how Western imperialism has just really squandered its leadership following World War II. Because after World War II, the U.S. specifically was the dominant global superpower. It accounted for half the global economy, less than 5% of the population. And it just used that obscene share of wealth and power, and they leveraged it, to create this world that we've all enjoyed for the last 75 years, where we have all these attacks on democracy, overthrowing these legitimate people and putting in our dictators, etc. So we've squandered it. People are sick of that. The good news is it's on its way out, right? And we have a new order coming in, based on principles of sovereignty and non-interference with other countries and peace through mutual prosperity. Can you imagine? So there's a lot of reason to be optimistic and to celebrate the decline of this awful empire. We want accountability, but we'll settle for just positive change.
I have some final thoughts on that, but maybe Carla should
we don't need to do final. We got one more hour, Ben.
I just wanted to. I had something
been
on my mind that I wanted to ask you in relation to that. And China is doing wonderful work, but and one of their strengths, it's genuinely a strength, I think, is to allow countries to be what they are. There's a lot of truth to first you develop the economy and you get people fed and you get them housing and all that, and then you worry about the extra stuff. Yes. And even in certain situations, those the social conflicts will take care of themselves if people are taken care of, if they have health care and all that stuff.
If they're not fighting,
I believe all of that
over scarcity. Yeah.
But the thing that concerns me is when I think back on Aknakari, what was that? 1928 or
I
something.
don't know what Achnacary is.
Okay, Achnacary was when the three major oil giants in the Middle East at that time, the French, the British, and to a lesser degree the United States, got together and decided they would not infringe on each other's turf in the Middle East.
Ah, I see.
And
Sliced it up.
and also this Kalius Gulbenkian, who Mr. 5%, who later on was responsible. They had all the major oil companies had this enormous meeting to discuss the oil in the Middle East, and as part of the deal, he would get 5% for brokering all of these oil deals. And one thing I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but he's said to have taken a map of that region and said, this is Syria, this is Iraq, this is Iran, this is Jordan, this goes to you and that goes to you, Mr. 5%. So those boundaries are still for the majority of people's. I mean, for the majority are still in place. Those boundaries are artificial.
Yeah.
So
I was just saying, look at those borders. They're beautifully natural, like this ruler is, isn't it? The same goes for Africa.
Yeah, exactly. And so the thing is, when you do a Belt and Road Initiative and you don't want to break up the colonial boundaries, what are going to be the ramifications of that? And that has like fevered my brain now for
I understand
several
your question,
years.
yeah.
And I look for the evidence of problems. I mean, obviously something like the Sudan, for example, which is now in major conflict. A lot of it is along those kind of lines, or actually probably more pronounced Ethiopia, where they just had a civil war. Well, the Tigray in the north of Ethiopia had ruled with the backing of the United States and Britain for decades, and then of course the majority of Ethiopians weren't getting shit, so they said, well, let's go with the other party, the majority party. And now there's been it devolved into civil war, but
I think
so there is those, because of these artificial boundaries, there are these conflicts. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. I mean, basically, I'd bring up, I understand the question, I understand the concerns. I want to bring up the Middle East because it's a perfect example of recent diplomatic efforts. I mean, just today, the Arab League welcomed back Syria, basically, despite the US's big pronunciations, we are not ready. Famous Arab country, the United States is. We're not ready for this, and you shouldn't do this, and they just did it, and that means that the United States is no longer welcome in the region. They have to pack up and leave. It's part of the agreement. And if you look at this at the long term, as you said, first you bring up housing, basic general well-being. Sooner or later, those boundaries set up by the West in order to facilitate mostly these ethnic or religious conflicts that they find and amplify, they can, I'm not going to say wither away. That sounds Marxist, but if the whole region becomes unified under the Belt and Road, then people can just go across these boundaries and have a wife there, do a little second job there, and it basically, in the long term, which is how China thinks, it ceases to be, I think, a factor or an issue, and that is the direction. I'm not saying it's going to go that smoothly. As you said, the Belt and Road has been attacked militarily, physically, as well as in the media numerous times. So they're trying to resist, but that's my
that
long.
was a great point, and I want to just say the same thing. Basically, Carlos bringing up the fact that the borders in the Middle East and Africa were really drawn by the imperialists with the intent of making it very easy to to divide the population along religious, cultural, ethnic lines, and that's
Yugoslavia.
They would create these borders where it would be easy to pit one group against the other and keep it destabilized so we can exploit and rape it. So what is the solution? The solution is peace through mutual prosperity. The solution is ending the kind of exploitation and scarcity, ending the looting of these countries, and developing unity, among all people. It's the only approach. It's the only solution. Is we have to learn to overcome our differences as humanity, our religious differences, our cultural differences, our ethnic, our the way we look, those kinds of differences. Like those are less important than the reality that in a particular country that has many different kinds of people, it's being raped and exploited by the imperialist West. Like, so I think once we take care of that rape and exploited part and start developing it and bringing prosperity, it'll be a lot easier to overcome these kinds of differences that the imperialists bank on to maintain their power. So that's basically what Ben said, and I was just restating it.
To bring it my usual old school, because I'm not this new left commie perspective. I live in Peach. The border between Yugoslavia and us is that direction, about 30 kilometers. So about 50 kilometers there is Osijek, Esig, currently in Croatia, and that direction is Subotica, Sobotka, which is current day Serbia. But even then, when they were Yugoslavia, we were the Soviet, the Stalin bloc. And we weren't supposed to get along. We went across that border all the time. We called them brat, which is friend, brother. They called us steshul. And we were just basically the same people, understanding with different colors of red. It's possible. Even while Tito lived, the 6 people of Yugoslavia, they had intermarriages. People, often brother fought brother when the wars came out. They were friends for all their lives. And it's just horrific and that was the plan, I think, for Russia. And I hope that the region can reconcile as well as most of the world along the lines that you described. And if we are in final thoughts, we don't have to be. 2 names to bring into this. One is Dilma Rousseff, who's a leftist former president of Brazil, who is now the head of the new development bank, the BRICS Bank. Hello, how the clock has turned, how the dice has rolled. The second name is Ben Wallace. I don't share a name with him. I'm Bente, which is from Vincent. I'm not Benjamin. Farewell, you bastard. After saying my country is not Amazon, so you can order weapons to Zelensky for it. We're not Amazon. You should be more grateful. He's resigned and he wants to live in a pub, work in a pub or something. Goodbye, Benny. That's what I wanted to say.
I heard about his resignation, and what I heard about his resignation is that he resigned because he didn't want to be a part of the West going to full-blown conventional war with both Russia and China. So I was a little concerned that the reasons why he is resigning, and is it a signal that a full conventional war on 2 fronts is what the West is planning with both Russia and China? Because honestly, that was the only. I didn't even get to read an article, explaining why he resigned, but that was on somebody's Facebook. He mentioned that he thought, a war with both Russia and China was insane.
The original article, I think it was in the Times, a British magazine, and this was during the weekend, and it said a war on 3 fronts. So it said Russia, China, and Africa for some reason. That really had my head turning like that. Why would Britain or Europe go to war with Africa? But it was interesting that he added that, wasn't it?
Oh. Yeah, that is. And I didn't know he did, but if he did, that is interesting. I mean, and again, Africa is the battleground, because we can't let China develop that country and promote peace and prosperity.
All of those sweet resources that made Europe rich in the first place. Come on.
Yeah. We can't just give that up and let the Africans have it with Chinese help. So I mean, I think we're already at war. I mean, I think we've been at war. I mean, Patrice Lumumba, you guys brought him up. I mean, we're at war with Africa. We're at war with the people of Africa. We never stopped. But I mean, we could escalate. There can be an escalation, but they call it a Cold War, but a lot of places in Africa, it was a hot war.
Let's remain cautiously hopeful, as we have tried to be so far. Yes.
Well, The thing is, I mean, they don't have an option. So if that's going to be their option, they're going to lose. But all of us are going to lose. Like if that's the strategy they pursue, they're not going to come out on top, but it's going to be a lot worse for everyone than if they just said, hey, you know what? Let's just stop this whole imperialism thing. Let's give up this hegemony. Let's work with China. Let's just start, what's that word? building. Let's build, develop. Let's develop the world together. Let's develop these poor areas. Let's work, peace. We'll have peace through mutual prosperity. So that's the correct approach that would benefit everyone. And sooner or later, that's going to be the approach that we take. But do we have to have a war first? We don't, but it's really not up to me. It's up to the people that make the decisions in the West. So I'm not sure they're not going to choose to have a war first. And maybe Ben Wallace resigning is suggestive that that's what's on the horizon, which will give our discussion, our roundtable, a lot more to talk about for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't bookmark it. I wish I could find it. Our friend and previous guest, S.L. Canton, undid something, I think, miraculous. And it was a joint European Union, after 7 years of negotiations, eked out this beautiful agreement on investment with China. Basically, China would have been opened up to European corporations 7 years. And they were ready to sign it, I think, in December 2019 or 20. Don't quote me on that. It was a CAI, Comprehensive on Investment, Agreement on Investment, CAI, you can Google it. And the US axed it. And then they went from a strategic competitor now to a threat, basically. It would have been, as George Galloway said, we could have developed in mutually, the two suns could have shone at the same time. Instead, the West had to set and the East had to rise, which is
my first thought is the West is so obviously a vassal. The Western Europe is so obviously a vassal of the US, but I'm misspeaking because
2 years ago, we had different aspirations. That's the point. It was axed, but we had some aspirations to go along with the East, and it was axed.
And we vetoed it, like the United States vetoed it, but it's not the United States, right? It's not the people of the United States. It's the interests that govern the United States. It's the policymakers in the United States, and in whose interest are they working? It's this tiny elite minority of psychopathic people who are ridiculously wealthy and powerful. It's a class of people. It's the capitalist class.
It makes no difference if they're neocons, neolibs, or AOC progressives. You can see that on most issues, 80% of the issues, they are exactly lockstep, serving the same interests, and they're not yours. They are not yours.
Right. They're not thinking about what's in the best interest of humanity. They're not thinking about what's in the best interest of the vast majority of people in the United States, the vast majority of people in Western Europe. They don't care about that. They care about maintaining this system and their power. And that's it. And they have all the lackeys. They own both political parties. The AOCs, they own AOC, just like they own what's that guy from South Carolina? That
Lindsey fucking Graham.
Lindsey Graham. Like they these are their people.
One more thing. I'm sure you haven't seen most of them, but Tucker Carlson, put your thoughts about him to one side. He interviewed all the presidential candidates on the Republican side. And I just want to bring up one guy, this Pence guy. He was Trump's VP, right? Mike Pence. And he started saying, you want to send more tanks and shit to Ukraine. Have you seen the deteriorating cities in America? Have you seen how everything's gotten worse? And he just sat there, not even regretting it, saying, that's not my concern. It's not his concern.
Right.
Sorry.
I saw that video clip. The American people, the deteriorating cities, that's not my concern. And thank you for your honesty. Yeah. But I mean, AOC ought to say the same shit, and she never will. But I mean, that's the reality. They don't represent humanity. They don't represent the interests of the vast majority. They're opposed to those. So they represent the wealthy. And all this talk of democracy, it's democracy, yes, for the ridiculously wealthy and amoral.
Yeah, and it's nauseating, to be honest.
Yep. So, I had something else in mind I wanted to ask.
I could really continue ranting for another several hours.
Oh, okay.
If you guys don't say anything, I will.
Well, good. Let me go ahead. Let me find my train of thought while you rant.
I don't know. I mean, we've touched on several things. We've touched on the propaganda aspect and how they utilize their control over the platforms of mass communication, over the music industry, over the film industry, to rot people's brains and make them very ignorant. And I think we did a good job of touching on that. And we talked about, what motivates them. Are they motivated? Is the West motivated in furthering the interests of the vast majority, or are they just motivated in maintaining this barbaric system that they can control and exploit for their own benefit? Go ahead, Carlo.
No, actually, I probably shouldn't even bring this up. But
It might
what
be
about
fun.
I'm not gonna go off on this. Just want to hear your opinions. What do you think of the recent statements of RFK Jr.
Okay.
Specifically
concerning
You want me to go
COVID?
first?
Concerning COVID.
Do you want me to go first? I will put it this way. I would love to see, what is it called? Cornel West facing off with RFK Jr., facing off with Trump. A lot of them I have disagreements on different points. A lot of them I have agreements on points. But this debate, something like this would really expose a lot of narratives. If you want me to answer you specifically on the pandemic, there are a lot of studies coming out, and I don't think any longer that what he and Jimmy Dore and a lot of people are saying, it's very much in the Western mainstream when it comes to medicine about this stuff. I don't think I can say more than that, but I don't think he's off the mark there. It's something they use to smear him. Look, he's one of those COVID conspiracists, which is still a big, sorry, I said it. I don't know if we'll get demonetized. But yeah, that's not one of the issues I have with him. The main issue I have with him is Israel, like completely along with the Israel agenda. But still, these three candidates, I would love them going off against each other.
I don't have enough certainty with the COVID narrative to have a strong opinion, and I don't want to cancel anybody for saying something that's conspiratorial, because I think there's a lot of shenanigans going on with that. And I, I don't, my opinions aren't strong enough. I don't have enough certainty to know exactly what the truth is, but I don't want to shut people up, but YouTube definitely will. So maybe we want to just be careful, because they'll pull the video if we talk.
Right. I see. That's right.
Yeah.
About that.
I want to say that.
But Carlo, if you oppose Kennedy on that issue, I think you can say that without YouTube. I mean, I think you can promote the mainstream thing.
And we're okay having different opinions. That's fine.
I'm not really opposing him. But it reminded me of what happened during the AIDS epidemic, because it was striking. It was murderous for the gay community, but it was also for the poor Black community. It was also tremendously. It was terrible. There was this not she wasn't so young, this researcher who was putting out the theory that it was targeted. It was a creation of the Central Intelligence Agency, and they were targeting these groups, and Pacifica Radio here in Washington, WPFW, gave her a platform, and she laid out her theories. But of course, ultimately, she was squashed and ridiculed, and in rare occasion in the mainstream press, the big, like the Post or something, she was ridiculed. But that RFK statement reminded me of her statement about it. And
in retrospect, did her statement turn out to be factual?
Well, no one really knows.
Oh,
but yeah. I lean toward yes. She was.
I think you can say all that without an issue. Yeah.
Yeah. I because look, Fort Detrick is right up 270 from where I live. I mean, we can drive there in 45 minutes.
I don't want to get into this either, but this thing showed up in Spain and numerous places in Europe in the sewage system months before December 2019. We don't want to say more.
Okay. I don't know how sensitive you.
I think. I mean, they'll never admit to the actual truth, because I don't think the truth is in their interest. But I think we'll learn more about it in the years to come. And there's studies going on that the demographics. There's certain things they're not going to be able to lie about. But we'll have concrete. We'll have some more concrete information in the years to come. But like the JFK murder, like the AIDS epidemic.
When will we ever learn the full JFK murder story? Will we ever get that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe if there's a successful revolution and the people actually take power over the government.
When we get access to the archives, basically, that's when we get to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the Smedley Butler archives were supposed to be released after 75 years, and it's been 75 years, and I find no evidence of it. I've thought about
Yeah,
five.
there's been deadlines for JFK information too, and they keep pushing it
Yeah,
off. So it's
yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah.
I keep saying, well, I should file a FOIA, but I'm too old. By the time they got the materials to me, I probably couldn't handle them. But also, they just send you redacted pages, and you learn nothing.
And the idea that you could utilize their legal system, like the Freedom of Information Act, to get them to confess is preposterous. Like, if they don't want you to know something, I don't care FOIA or not, you're not going to learn it. Just
It's
like with the
true.
FISA court, like they just go to the FISA court, give me a, they don't. There's no system of justice. It
Yeah,
doesn't. That's not how things work.
I want to quibble with that a little bit
Okay.
because things do get through, but then you run into the general ignorance of the American population and disinterested.
Wait, ninny alert. You have to
disinterestedness.
call them ninnies.
Ninnies. I'm sorry, the ninnyhood,
I don't have a sound button. Sorry.
the ninnyhood of the traveling pants. But people are they don't care. They're indifferent. Something really, I can't think of things off, but Seymour Hersh has certainly turned up things like that. And
Yeah.
certainly things like that have turned up in the Covert Action Information Bulletin. And now it's called the Covert Action Magazine. And this guy, the current editor, Nuzmarov, does a wonderful job of occasionally culling some of these facts that come out from FOIA, but they just die on the vine because no one cares.
Mm.
And one of the reasons is it's fragmented. You'll come out with something on the Kennedy assassination, then it'll be something on Iran Contra, then it'll be something on the October surprise, and it's like people, it's all over the place and people don't care. The October surprise, there. You want to talk about our election being stolen? Reagan made a deal with the Iranians to give them missiles in exchange for releasing the hostages.
Well, I think it was keeping the hostages hostage past the
hostage,
election.
right? Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Which is even more disgusting, right? Oh, just keep them a little bit longer, Iran, because if you let them go before the election, I might not win.
And how many years did you have to wait for that? I mean, right now we know this. Somehow there was cocaine in the White House, but there was no leads. No, we don't know where from. We don't know how it got there.
There's always cocaine in the White House.
that's true enough.
There's probably been cocaine in the White House since Chester B. Arthur was president.
That's probably.
I like
true.
how they preposterously say, "Oh, we don't know." Like, give me a break.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
They know.
Look,
We could talk domestic. We could get a little contentious. Domestic policy issues. I meant to touch on it last week, but we didn't have time. But what was some of the big stories? I guess, Trump is just winning in all the polling. I remember. So there were some hearings. There was some great hearings, and the Republicans really held the feet to the fire. So the hearings are theater. Hearings is the most accountability you're ever going to see when the bad guys are on the bench and they have to look like they're ignorant, and you get the Congress people that represent the other billionaires get to say bad things about them in a partisan way. So it's partisanship, but it was great nonetheless to see the FBI director having his feet held to the fire about all kinds of things, like January 6th. Like he said, I don't know how many FBI informants, how many FBI undercover agents were on the ground January 6th. Of course he does. And everybody knows he does, but he couldn't say it. Then there's the pipe bomb issue. Like there was a pipe bomb that was timed. So the whole point is January 6th was in my opinion, and this might get us off of YouTube again. But there was coordination. It was a planned thing that the establishment did to discredit Trump and exploit what was going on, to create something that was going to be exploited, and then and utilize exactly how it's been against Trump. It's not working. Trump is still winning in the polls, but there was a plan by the establishment to disrupt the vote process, where you're certifying all the different states' elections, and the pipe bomb was timed just in order to do that. And So there's all kinds of conspiracy theories that are out in the open because they're not conspiracies, because you had the Republican representatives pointedly going after these questions against the FBI director, who said, "Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea." So it was really good theater, and it's the closest we're going to get to accountability.
True.
But to me, it just proves that the whole idea that is in the mainstream about January 6th is quite different than what is being reported.
True.
And everybody knows it. Yeah, go ahead.
In the spirit of giving kudos to people who we don't actually agree with 100%, but still, when they do good stuff, they did good stuff. The son of Ron Paul, the libertarian guy, like, I think libertarian ideology on economics is silly. They probably think I'm silly on economics. That's fine. But that guy has done the most to hold the FBI and these people's feet to the fire. He really is very, very good on this deep state roasting level. And kudos to him on that, at least.
Yeah.
But that's a couple of things.
And against the wars, by the way.
Yes, against the war, right? Yeah, this latest vote, there was just two people. I mean, the other guy was Josh Hawley,
who's that?
He's a far right,
rabid anti-China hawk.
Oh, I didn't know him.
Southern senator, but two things. Well, something came to mind, and in two parts. First of all, as we're talking about January 6th, so there was this guy, and I can't remember his name offhand, but
something
all over the internet. They say, well, why wasn't he
the Fed? Yeah.
Why wasn't he indicted? Well, the answer's simple.
He's a Fed.
He turned state's evidence, and they gave him amnesty. They said they wouldn't prosecute him. It's as simple as that. But part of those deals are, you can't go public with this. That you can't say you made a deal with us. So we won't lock you up for 25 years like we can. But what we'll do is if you name names and places and all that stuff and help us out, and it's not just January 6th this guy knows about. He knows about everything that went on before that, because they obviously have all this valuable information they got somehow. We'll let you go. You'll be the guy. And I think that's the obvious answer.
That's one unprovable theory. The Fed theory is also unprovable. So yeah.
Yeah, but obviously that's the pattern that follows in these things. And what was the other? I can't think of the other aspect of it. So I'll go right to the heart of what I was thinking. Trump does a lot of interviews, and in those interviews, he says he could end the Ukraine war.
Oh, and now he said how? Yes.
Yeah, how?
Now he said it.
Has anybody heard any?
Yeah, haven't you seen it? He said he'd sit down in an hour, and he's going to tell Putin he respects me, he loves me. He said, make a deal right now, or we give everything to Ukraine. And he just sit down to Zelensky and say, make a deal right now, or we're going to give you nothing. That's his basic understanding of how he's going to stop it. But at least we got a Trump method now.
Well, that's kind of. I don't find many flaws with that, to tell you the truth.
That's what he said.
As far as a plan goes, but it reminded me very much of the Nixon-Kissinger peace plan for Vietnam, which was just a hustle. And it was an out and out lie, because then the war went on for 5 more years.
Personally, I don't think Trump is interested in pursuing this neocon agenda of destabilizing and defeating Russia and then attacking China. Like, I think he wants to do business with them. I think Trump's a businessman. He thinks, that he can do better, and he's not on board with this ambition of global domination. Of course, he's an old school imperialist. He wants to subjugate those countries that are weak, and he wants to overthrow the Venezuelan government and take their oil. Sure, but I don't think he wants World War III. He's willing to do business with China. He wants to get a good deal for the U.S. He's willing to do business with Russia, but he's not on board with a neocon agenda of overthrowing and destroying these societies. And that's why he's not going to be tolerated or allowed. And that's why they hate him so much. But at his heart, I don't think he's on board with that. And I think that's a fundamental difference. Now, how can he do it? Well, He doesn't know how he can do it because number one, he's not going to ever be able to. He's not going to be given the chance to do it. Right? They're not going to let him back into office. And if they do, they're going to kill him because they're not going to give him the support. They're going to do the same thing they did to him the first time, which is, undermine him at every turn and just ignore his ignore his commands, his decrees, his what he says is going to be done. So you make a good point about Epps. Not to change the subject back again, but I mean that's a plausible explanation. I don't buy that. Honestly, I've seen the footage of Epps. I don't think they needed any information from Epps. What information do they need? They have all the cell phones. They have everything. They got surveillance. They got total surveillance.
Let's not get bogged down there. It's two unprovable theories.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say this on Trump, which is misunderstood, I think, because people down on the streets at our level think, oh, who's very rich? That's the obvious thing. But when it comes to the world of Silicon Valley billionaires, the big oil bankers, he's tiny money. He's a little opportunist looking to make a buck. That is what he is, a little fish in the big pond. So he will obviously go against some of these, the big five oil banks, the Silicon Valley, Metas, Facebooks, all this. Compared to him, he's small fries and doesn't belong. So that's why he said drain the swamp and failed, but he really doesn't belong. He really was kind of an insurgent candidate, which always gives me a bit of hope. However stupid he is, however stupid he looks, he's a buffoon. That is all true. Probably a womanizer. Well, I miss seeing with his orange lips that he says China. I kind of do, but yeah, even if he's like an actor who looks like a porno actor, I didn't mind him because he says everything, the quiet part, out loud. Now, I have to do some more work tonight. I don't know if we can get close to wrapping it up with some final thoughts, guys.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's disconcerting to me to see me launch into a rant with like 8 live viewers. And then when I'm done with my rant, I look and there's only like 2 left. So that doesn't make me feel good, but, it does feel good to, to give my opinion and to get all excited about it. And I mean, we could continue, but we're already an hour and 37 minutes in. So I appreciate this opportunity and the discussion and even the disagreement. Like the disagreement is good, but I think, we're setting an example for what we need more of in this society, which is more discussion, a wider range of opinions. But discussion is definitely good. And I think maybe we could try to get on people that disagree with us, that
absolutely
see things totally different. Like we do a lot of inviting guests on who are pretty much lockstep and see things how we see things. And maybe but Carlo, you'd have to behave. You'd have to be nice to them.
Yeah. A year ago, I wouldn't have talked to the likes of, I don't mean star power, I mean their ideas of Tucker Carlson or Ron Paul. And I would absolutely talk to them,
Carlo's non-committal. He's non-committal. He can't do it.
I understand.
Idiots. He has no tolerance for idiots.
Oh, what was it? Does this involve me? You're talking about me?
Well, I was just saying we could invite guests on that we don't necessarily agree with, that have, opinions that are totally different with regards to imperialism. They might even think that, they might even support what we're doing in Ukraine. They might support the Republicans, just to make things interesting. But I'm just saying the prerequisite to with that would be that, we'd have to try and be nice and hear them out.
Yeah, but the problem is often the quality of the argument they give is not thoughtful.
We point that out.
Then we tear them apart. Sorry.
But we don't shut them up. Like we gotta let them say their piece.
No, we go on the arguments. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
If we're on the end, then I'd still like to say bye-bye, Ben Wallace, and bye-bye, Grain.
All right. Bye-bye, Billy Bob. Bye-bye, Ben.
Okay.
Bye-bye, Carlo.
We'll talk after the broadcast. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
I'm going to hit end broadcast.